quickly go over what we're attempting to do today. So what we're trying to do is we're going to look at strategies for designing and managing digital apprentices programs. We're going to try and get some tips for supporting apprenticeships, professional development and skills training, and provide some guidance on providing diversity and inclusion with digital apprenticeships. So the first question I have, I'm just going to go through the questions, is for Tony. Tony, can you provide an overview of digital apprenticeships and the role that BCS plays in supporting both employers and apprenticeships to ensure successful outcomes?
Sure. So let's start with the baseline definition of an apprenticeship, which is a job with training that's underpinned by funding. That's either through the apprenticeship levy or through government funding if you're an SME. So that job with training is delivered along regulated lines. So the apprenticeship standards are written by employers. They're not written by BCS. They are, although BCS assesses the apprenticeship programs, we're not responsible for writing them. Effectively, the people on the call are the managers and the people who are practitioners and specialists in their field write the apprenticeship standards. The apprenticeship standards kind of like an extended job description. Think of it that way. And by the end of the apprenticeship, the apprentice must be able to demonstrate competency against each element of that job description. BCS's role in all of this is to support those apprentices as they're being assessed. So we're the ones who carry out the assessment. We're independent of the employer. We're independent of the college or the training provider that's delivering the training for the apprentice for the majority of the time that they are on their apprenticeship program. But for the final 2 to sometimes even 6 months, the apprentices go through what's called an endpoint assessment, and that's where they're handed from the training provider across to BCS, and we follow instructions, again, written by the employers as part of the apprenticeship program to say this is what the apprentice must be assessed against, and we work with the employer to make sure that those apprentices can demonstrate that competency. So in the world of digital apprenticeships, most apprentices will start at what's called level 3. So if you know your Sophia framework, for example, it's broadly similar, kind of apply and understand around level 3. In academic terms, it's roughly the kind of equivalent of doing a couple of A levels, but all the way up, the apprenticeships go to from level 3 up to level 7 in tech. Level 7 being the equivalent to master's degree. And some apprenticeships in tech and digital include degrees. Some don't contain degrees. So even at level 5, 6, or 7, you might do an apprenticeship standard at a fairly high level, but you might not do a degree as part of that. Some apprentices, and I believe Lewis is on a degree apprenticeship at the moment. They'll have a degree element to them. So there's a kind of variety of routes all the way through, a variety of different levels. And BCS is responsible for assessing tech and digital apprenticeships that do not contain a degree. That's our role in all of this.
Oh, Dan, I think we've lost your audio.
Sorry. Thank you, Tony. I'll stop doing that. So as a successful former apprentice, Anya, can you share some insights into the benefits of recruiting apprenticeships into small or medium-sized organizations like Bob's Business? How does this impact both business growth and individual development?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Dan. So a couple of things, really. So working in a small business myself, one of the ways that I found out about Bob's was through a careers fair at my local school. And so that's where my journey started out. I heard about them. And then when it came to doing work placements, which we were encouraged to do around, I think I was about 14 at the time, I reached out to them via an email because I had a little business card stuffed in the back of my backpack from 6 months ago on a careers fair. And I think I had a pencil or something that said Bob's Business at the time. And so I remembered them. And I reached out and I did this work placement with them for a week, and they asked me if I was interested in doing an apprenticeship once I'd finished. And I thought about it, and I ended up doing that. And I guess the kind of what I want to get out of that particular kind of journey is that it's so important for especially small businesses to develop their talent pipeline, they're almost finding them skilled workers and priming them, even just by going to schools and attending careers fair or mock interview days. You might not realize it, but actually you probably make a really big impact on some of those individuals that attend them. And then, you're creating that relationship and reinforcing it through different stages of their education journey, so that when they do get to 16 or post A levels and 18, you can potentially have a apprentice, which then you can mold into the skills that you need that staff member to be, and also get the pleasure of supporting a young adult making their progression into their career. It's also a cost-effective way of talent acquisition. Going to careers fairs and taking on apprentices that way isn't necessarily costing. You're not paying for a job advertisement as such. Yes, it's the cost of your team's time for that day and to go and set up and maybe take some swag, but it's a lot more cost-effective than probably doing lots and lots of time and posting on LinkedIn. So I think it's really, really valuable for small businesses. And yeah, I would definitely say invest in it. It'll take a lot of time, which I'm sure we'll go into later on. But I think what you get out is a loyal employee, someone who's molded to your business, has grown with your business, and someone who probably really values you as a manager or whatever your role will be in their apprenticeship. So yeah. We can't hear you again.
I don't know why I turned it off. So, but is that your opinion as well, having been through that process? Do you feel a huge amount of loyalty to Bob's business for the opportunity they've given you?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've been there for it's coming up to my 5th year there. So I couldn't thank them enough for being there at that careers fair and then just being so friendly and then offering me the apprenticeship in a town where cybersecurity apprenticeships definitely don't come by often. That's for sure. And the people I work with day in, day out have been so influential to me in my career. And I would say I'm extremely loyal to that business. I really enjoy being there.
That's amazing, and I think Lewis has a slightly different experience, because you're a current digital apprentice in a large organization rather than a small or medium one. How does your experience differ, Lewis, from what Anya just described as the benefit of apprenticeships and SMEs? What do you see as the key advantages and challenges of being in such a large organizational structure?
Thanks, Dan. So for those who don't know, BAE Systems is a very, very large company with a #1 manufacturer in Britain and the largest defence contractor in Europe. We hire over 100,000 people, and each year we take on about 1,000 apprentices across the UK alone. This year alone, we had 25,000 applications for a scheme where we only hired 30 people. That's a lot of competition. And for someone who's looking for an apprenticeship, apprenticeships are already hard to get. They're very sought after and lots of people want them. But to have that amount of competition can really knock down an apprentice to choose something that's maybe not as good. And these large businesses, the reason why so many people apply to them is due to their experience and the benefits they grant that other smaller businesses don't have access to. When we hire 1,000 apprentices each year, we kind of have an apprentice base of nearly 10,000 students. And they form their own small societies. We have councils made by apprentices for other apprentices that help apprentices along their journey. So it almost becomes a family of apprentices inside this business. So we all help each other through. It's a lot in like university where you have your societies and clubs, where it's the same thing. Large businesses, the apprentices will start up clubs or start up societies, and they'll all make their own sort of packs. They'll organize things amongst themselves. They'll organize projects, stretch assignments. They'll go out and promote the business. They will go and do a lot of extracurricular stuff, and especially in large business, because they almost want to prove themselves more. And proving yourself when you're 1 in 10,000 apprentices is so necessary, because even though most larger businesses have the capability to keep on all 1,000 apprentices each year once they finish their apprenticeship. They might only be able to take on those 1,000 into lower level jobs. So in a lot of large businesses, you'll see something called an accelerated apprentice, which is a selected few apprentices from their schemes where they're pushing them to more management roles, getting those higher wages, which is ultimately what an apprentice my age would usually see. They'll see those higher roles, they'll see those higher wages, and they will want to work for them. And when you're 1 in 1,000, you really have to put a lot of effort in to show yourself above others. And when everyone's doing it, it's, it can be really difficult. There almost becomes a unspoken competition between apprentices and who can prove themselves the most, especially with global and sort of nationwide awards, like the National Apprentice Awards. It might not seem that necessary to an employer, but apprentices see that award and they want it, and everybody wants it. It's like getting the Dean's Award from a university, or getting a scholarship, or getting these really high nominations from high up organizations. And when you're getting those, they really do push your career. They push your career into enormous amounts. You can post that on your LinkedIn, loads of people will react to it, and you'll get job recruits from everywhere. And that's what a lot of apprentices see. They see this option and scheme as a way for them to build themselves up. And when you're in a business with 100,000 people, unlike Anya said, you don't feel as much loyalty to the company, even though I'm very thankful for my position here at BAE Systems, and I'm definitely going to continue working here after my apprenticeship. I have no need to. I could take my degree, have no university debt, take all my 4 years experience, and go somewhere else where they could potentially be offering me more, because I've done all of my effort in my apprenticeship to do these extracurricular stuff and activities that will help me get those roles as well. So it is definitely difficult being in a larger business. You really have to push yourself out there, and some apprentices aren't ready to do that, but that's okay, because those apprentices usually whittle those out in the interview stages. Other things about being in a really large business is large businesses have the experience in pastoral care. They will have departments dedicated to people's mental health, and departments of people dedicated to supporting an apprentice. If I could probably list off 10 people right now that I have to report to about my apprenticeship: skills coaches, managers, university communication providers, the university itself, loads of people that their job is to help me through this scheme. That's their job. They help me through my scheme, whether that's helping me with my business expenses, helping me in day-to-day meetings, doing one-to-ones, making sure I'm okay, or offering me a springboard for my university assignments. On both sides, in the university and on the work, that's what their roles are, is to help you as an apprentice go up there. And when a smaller business doesn't have those people, an apprentice has to essentially sort after that themselves, or just go without, which in a degree apprenticeship can be very daunting, because at the end of the day, you're doing a degree on top of a full-time job, which neither of it is easy, but when you're doing them both at the same time, it can get quite stressful. So having those people in place is really, really helpful. But then it also means with a large company, you do just feel like a number sometimes. You'll get the yearly report of how many employees have joined, how many employees have left, and they just post it as numbers. We are numbers to them. When I log into my laptop, I'm logging in with a number. And I'm known as me in my department and maybe the wider team, but that's it. My name's irrelevant throughout that. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about trying to promote yourself as an apprentice. There are apprentices here that have done such brilliant outside of work activities that have helped them promote their own name in there, who are now directing certain business departments in the company. So it really does show what an apprentice can do if they apply themselves and go for those extracurricular activities. But you have to be in a large business to have those in place, because smaller businesses just cannot afford to do it. They can't facilitate it, and they can't allocate the apprentice the time to do that. So there are definitely advantages and disadvantages of being in a large business. But overall, the one thing I'll go back to is being in a large business gives you a lot of accreditation. Being able to say I work at BAE Systems, especially when it's a household name amongst the defence sectors, is very, very helpful. I don't need to immediately explain what we do. I don't need to explain how difficult it is to get a job here. The employer or the recruiter, they already know. It's a household name. They already know, and they're already impressed by that. And that will put me in front of someone else who maybe works for a business that you've never heard of before. That doesn't mean to say that that business that you've never heard of before is doing bad work. They're probably doing better work, but just because they're not a well-known brand or name in those industries just means it can be more of a struggle. So you have to fulfill even more of those outside of work activities to promote your name. So you have to find a balance between the both, but definitely being a large business, it is definitely more advantageous towards an apprentice for many aspects. It can be detrimental in others, but I think for me, in my opinion, overall, if you can get, if as an apprentice, this is me addressing other apprentices, if you can apply to apprenticeships in larger businesses, do, and push for those first, and then look at those smaller businesses as more of a reserve option. But yeah.
I would say maybe not a reserve. I would say maybe more of a, you should figure out what suits you. People, I think you would agree, Lewis, that by the sounds of it, there's a lot of variation of different apprentices at BAE. And yeah. I think people work differently in different ways. And some people may prefer somewhere close to home, or with that more, like I get a lot of, I've worked my way up and managed now to be in a position where I actually get quite a lot of face time with my CEO. In fact, I directly report to the CEO now, whereas to some people, they might think that's, that's like super valuable. That's something I want. Whereas someone else may feel that actually, no, I want to be a part of a large team that works as part of this whole like umbrella organization instead of having that direct relationship with senior management. And I think that's something that you probably get a lot more of in a small business rather than, like you say, working with a larger. So I think it's what works for you. I would definitely say apply for the big schemes, but also keep your eye on LinkedIn for when the local companies are doing them. And also with small businesses, sometimes they don't even know they need an apprentice until you email them, and then they might start thinking, oh, actually, like, so if you're thinking about leaving, you're leaving A-levels or finishing A-levels or school in a couple of months, maybe start emailing. Or even if it's just go in and do the benefit of small businesses, especially if they're not too far from you, is that you could probably email them and ask to do some work experience. And if they're not remote, usually the answer maybe will be, if you're nice enough, will be yes. And hopefully then you'll get a taste for that culture. And, over the course of a couple of days, maybe you might think, oh, actually a small business isn't for me. But then maybe you actually like the fact that everyone knows everyone. But
yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more. There's definitely a lot more opportunities for closer relationships in a smaller business.
I think Tony, it's just finding what works for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Tony, I was just wondering, Tony, if you had, as an overview, what's the sort of breakdown of apprenticeships in small, medium to? Do you have that information to large organizations?
Yeah, so historically, SMEs recruited, going back kind of 9-10 years, SMEs recruited the bulk of apprentices in England. That's flipped since the introduction of the apprenticeship levy. So we now have more people who are working for apprenticeship levy paying businesses. Those are typically medium to larger organizations that pay a contribution of their PAYE into what's known as the apprenticeship levy pot. That's a ring-fenced amount of money. It stays ring-fenced for 2 years. So if you pay in this month, for example, that money will stay for 2 years in that pot unless you spend it. And then after 2 years, it goes to His Majesty's revenue. So it's use it or lose it money. And levy payers tend to be the ones who are recruiting more apprentices now. That has been identified as an issue. So there are likely to be some incentives and some local initiatives coming through, particularly in devolved areas, for SMEs to consider taking on apprentices. There have been a few in the past where there have been some financial incentives to make contributions towards hiring or salaries or capital costs for bringing on apprentices. Those are very piecemeal at the moment, those incentives, but there's some rumblings now in central government and in the combined authorities about bringing them back in to try and encourage more SMEs to take apprentices on.
Okay.
So the split is kind of leans more towards the bigger businesses at the minute, but that's not to say SMEs aren't taking people on. We're talking kind of 60-40-ish, Dan. It's not kind of massively skewed. But it used to be the other way around. It used to be kind of 60-40 in favor of SMEs.
Thanks for that clarification, Tony. Just on what Lewis was talking about, them having somebody in these large organizations to deal with lots of aspects of welfare or progression of apprenticeships. If I could go back to you, Anya. So, I mean, I know you now involved. You're no longer an apprenticeship. You worked your way up into a role in the organization. What would you say if I'm thinking about small to medium size businesses? As an employer, what are the greatest challenges to overcome in creating a supportive and effective workplace? Because you have to do that alongside your job.
Yeah, it's definitely iron out what managers are capable of managing and supporting an apprentice. Because unlike Lewis, I had one manager and one person that supported me through my apprenticeship, and it was kind of dumped on that person as, oh, we're taking on an apprentice, you're going to support them. And although he did an amazing job in the end, and I definitely wouldn't have been able to get through it without him, it's one of them things of, like, from the get-go, I could tell that it wasn't something he'd necessarily asked for and recruited for at the time. And so I think, when going back to the question about how, I guess the question is, how best can employers support the apprentice? Right. It's just making sure that they've got that work-life balance. I manage a couple of apprentices at the moment, and now being on the other side of it, I've got the experience of, like, okay, make sure you're taking your 20% off the job time, take the full day. On Wednesday, I think, is one of their college days. So he has Wednesday in college in the morning, and I say, you know what, for the rest of the afternoon, make sure you do the college work, get it out of the way, and then Thursday I want you back in and kind of full speed ahead, because then your focus be on that. Or alternatively, if Friday afternoons work, but as long as you keep that kind of communication with them open and what works best for them around their college or university time. I think, finding the right mentor as well. Like I said, it may be that mentor might not be their direct line report manager. It may be that that's someone else in the business that's maybe done an apprenticeship themselves, so maybe they can relate. They just might not be in the same department, hence them not being the line manager. Or maybe it's someone who just hasn't really done a apprenticeship at all, but maybe they're more of a kind of, they've had some background in education, or they're just that type of person to get stuck in and help someone. I think, trying to set up a support system before they come in, which I cannot stress this enough, because you realize, especially like when, because businesses of a certain size, smaller businesses, don't have kind of these apprenticeship programs laid out and what you're going to do each month. It's just not. And a lot of them take one on and expect the college or the apprenticeship provider to do all that planning, when actually they aren't prepared. So try and make sure and do as much research as you can before they actually start. And usually with these things, you get enough notice. So I think we've all been there, where we've hired someone and then they've turned up on the first day and you're like, shit, like I haven't done anything for them, excuse my French. And then they're there, start doing some e-learning modules while you're trying to figure out what they should do first. But with an apprentice, especially if this is their like first experience, either in this industry, if they're if they're a job swap, or maybe their first professional job and this is their first experience, you want it to be as structured and as planned as possible for them. And just introducing them into that kind of workplace culture that you have, because it might be very different to their previous role or that school or college setting. So trying and introducing them to people, maybe inviting them to any socials that you guys have. I found that a particularly difficult one when I was 16, and they were all saying, oh, we're heading to the pub after work, and I was sat there at 6 p.m. with a J2O, and then had to go from 7 because that's when it was over 18s only, and it was, it was so good. So maybe just trying to think, like, now I actively think, okay, well, can everyone do this? You know, can my under 18 apprentices come and join us along, and at least trying to be as inclusive, not every time, and I understand that's not always going to be the case, but as much as possible, really. So yeah, just planning ahead and trying to make them feel included, I would say.
Excellent. Tony, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Just 2 points I wanted to make. We're talking a lot about early careers at the moment. That doesn't necessarily mean school leavers, although I think Anya and Lewis both have experiences of coming out of school into apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are for anybody aged 16 plus. So we could also be talking about apprentices in the workplace who are career changers or going through career development. So don't want to exclude anyone in that part of the conversation. That's the first point. The second point is just to reinforce what Anya's saying there about the rules and the regulations around apprenticeships. Because I think that there's a danger for SMEs where they don't have the kind of infrastructure that perhaps Lewis has around them at the BAE, or the experience that perhaps some of the people in HR at Bob's Business might have had of working with apprentices in the past. If you take an apprentice on, they're on a contract that looks, to all intents and purposes, exactly like anybody else's contract within the business, with one or two very kind of small but key differences. The first is that it must mention that their contract of employment must mention the apprenticeship that they're on and the duration that it's expected to take. That's the first thing. So by the end of 18 months, Tony Pitchford will have completed his apprenticeship as a data analyst at level 4, for example, whatever it needs to say. The second thing is that apprenticeships is a protected characteristic. So what Anya's talking about there around taking time away from the workplace to kind of work off the job and complete your work towards your apprenticeship, that is a protected characteristic of an apprenticeship. It's part of the definition. It's a job with training. So the apprentices must be allowed the flexibility to be able to have that time away from their core duties to work on their apprenticeship itself. Now, I'm saying that very carefully, because going away from your core duties might not mean that you're kind of stepping completely away from your desk. It might mean that you're writing up what you're doing. It might mean that you're reflecting on what you're working on. It might mean that you're doing some micro training towards developing skills that you need to complete a task. But that needs to be documented and recorded. It needs to be reflected on as part of the apprenticeship. And SMEs need to make sure that they are allowing that flexibility within the apprenticeship delivery. And that comes down to, as Anya's pointed out, it's about good communication with the line manager, with the people around the apprentice, so that they're not tapping you on the shoulder on Wednesday afternoon when you should be doing something towards your apprenticeship program, and they're trying to get you back into your workflow, your projects, or whatever it is you're working on. So really, really important, I think. Kind of just wanted to kind of draw on that, because we are very focused on that area at the minute.
Excellent. I just remind people who are listening that if you have any direct questions for any of the panelists, just put them in the chat, and I'll try and direct them when possible. I mean, to carry on, Tony, we talked about, I mean, this is quite a difficult role that Anya is talking about. Supporting apprenticeships. How can we, our organisations, sort of regardless of size, ensuring that line managers are properly trained and supported to effectively guide their apprentices through the program? So what I mean, Anya has a lot of experience, but what is available for them to support them?
Yeah, I think it started with first principles, as Anya mentioned there. Doing the research beforehand, making sure that everybody is clear. Certainly from an SME point of view, if it's your first apprentice, get as much advice and guidance as you possibly can. Speak to other employers who have taken apprentices on, and find a training provider or a college that's going to work for you. One that works with you, that suits your working patterns. About 70% of all apprenticeships in England are delivered through private training providers. About 30%, that leaves the kind of remaining 30% are delivered through colleges, universities, employers themselves, or charities. So The private training provider market is kind of dominant in this space. So finding the right training provider, understanding what support is available already from the provider, what resources are out there that they might be able to access for you through the endpoint assessment organization. So for example, what EPA resources are available to support managers from an organization like BCS or any other organizations. And you know, I mean, there are lots and lots of really good resources available on the apprenticeships.gov.uk website for employers, including some really comprehensive guides about taking an apprentice on for the first time, supporting them in the workplace, getting access to materials. But it's not always perfect, and I think that part of the challenges that you know, that Anya's alluded to, and I know that Lewis will probably touch on, come from where line managers don't necessarily kind of, because you've got a day job to do as a manager, haven't you? You know, looking after an apprentice is something else on top of everything else. But taking a little bit of time to read through the apprenticeship standard, that description of what your apprentice is required to do as they're going through that training, and then critically taking that next step and reading through the assessment plan, which is the bit, I tend to use a really crude analogy here, and I'm going to apologize. I have to apologize. I haven't found a better one yet, but think of it like your driving test. You know, when you learn to drive, you sit with the instructor. You know, you might go out with mum or dad. You know, might borrow a car from someone. You go out on the road, and they're teaching you the rules of the road and the practical application of those rules, so that you're a safe and competent driver. But then you go to a test center, a Pearson VUE test center, and you sit your kind of multiple choice questions on the highway code, and then separately you go out with somebody who assesses your competence during your driving test. That's the bit that BCS does. We're independently assessing you against that competency. So if you as a manager understand the highway code for that particular apprenticeship, that's the assessment plan, you can start giving projects or you know, widening the scope of the work projects that your apprentices are doing, to make sure that they're covering those competencies on a regular basis, and they're getting good quality and quantity of evidence towards their portfolios, towards the projects and work-based experience that they need as they head towards endpoint assessment. So really good understanding of that. If anybody wants more, there is a BCS event coming up on the 3rd of December, which is the BCS Line Manager Toolkit event. I can pop the link in the chat, but it's a bespoke event for those people looking after tech and digital apprentices as line managers and mentors. It's a lunchtime session, and we'll get you through that and put some support in place. And that the toolkit itself, once you've been through the webinar, gives you access to some additional resources and support materials, and signposts you to go and get some support if you're struggling.
Thanks, Tony. I just changed tack just a little bit because Lewis, I just a question back to Lewis. I mean, you as well as being an apprentice, you did a T-level. You were a T-level student.
Yeah.
So we can talk a little bit about that, because that might also be very valuable to the people who are participating. How would you compare T-levels and digital apprenticeship experiences? And are there any synergies, do you think, between the two that could be better leveraged to support career progression? So if you want to talk about your T-level experience just a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So for anyone on this call, I'll quickly define what a T-level is. A T-level shares a lot of similarities to an apprenticeship, but still has very, very different standards. An apprenticeship is working with training. A T-level is training with working, completely the other way. So most T-levels, this isn't all, but I'll generalize them. Most T-levels are run by colleges, where a student will go into college 3 or 4 days a week, learn face-to-face with a teacher, the course standard, same as what you would learn in a BTEC. And then on those other 2 days, you'll be out in a work placement. Now, different colleges do this differently. For me, I did 1 day a week work placement, but some people do block placements. It really depends on the employer that the student goes to. And also depends on what the college wants to do as well with the sort of their planning. But that's the idea. The idea is you come out of college with some level of qualification and work experience. So then when you want to go get your first job, you can, because they'll hire you because you have that work experience. Unlike, you know, if you do A-levels, you might lack some work experience. You might have some college job experience. Maybe you took a part-time job outside of college, but a T-level is focused on getting your work experience that's relevant to your course. So for me, I studied a T-level in computer networking. They changed the course now because I was the first ever student to do that course. And there was only about 80 of us in the UK that was doing it at the time. But it was very poorly managed. And that's just because it was new. You know, you can't talk bad about T-levels. They are really, really great and they've come a long way. But when I was there, it was poorly managed. And that is all down to communication, solely down to communication. Lack of communication between the provider of the T-level and the employer. The employer didn't know what they were meant to do with this new work experience student, and the college didn't know what the work placement was doing. And that lack of communication was throughout the entire course. And that applies to apprenticeships as well. Having that communication between the training provider and the employer is so key, because then you can find out how your apprentice is doing. Are they maybe struggling with some of their work? If so, how can you support them? And maybe they're doing really well. How can you reward them? And then for the university side or the training provider side, how are they doing in work? What sort of projects are they working on? How are they doing? Maybe they could move around the modules that they're teaching to, you know, align to what they're working with, and they can sort of fit what they're doing towards those students. When I go to university with 80 other apprentices every month, the university I go to curates that module designed for us. You know, they know that we can't write loads about what we do at work because it's classified, so they don't ask us to. They communicate back and forwards between BAE Systems and the university, and then make sure that what they're teaching us is relevant. And BAE Systems does the same. They check in with the university every so often and make sure that we're, you know, keeping up with our studies, attending lectures, doing the assignments, how we're doing on the assignments, how maybe we could improve, making sure there's no, you know, pastoral or emotional support issues. And that was lacking in the T-level. Now, granted, they fixed that with T-levels. T-levels are amazing now. The BAE Systems offers T-level work placements, but loads of employers do. And it's a really great thing to do because they now have set standards, a lot like an apprenticeship standard. They now have T-level set standards where the student has to complete a certain number of skills, knowledge, and behaviors in the workplace for them to essentially pass their T-level. And they also have a minimum hours they have to do. They have to do about 400 hours of work placement. And as I said earlier, that can be between 1 day a week or maybe some block placements, but it really is up to the sort of work provider and the college. And it does go back to communication. It also comes to organization as well. T-levels these days are usually organized by the college, but they didn't used to be. They used to be, you know, go and find your own work placement. So I had to go find my own work placement, which showed because I found a poor work placement that didn't give me much to do. But nowadays, colleges will support a student in finding work placements. They'll have employee partners that they'll work with. And same with apprenticeship providers. They will have set training people that they will go to that they know they've got experience with. So they know when they send their apprentice there, they know they're getting a good result out of the training. So coming from T-levels, it's quite, I'm quite used to how apprenticeships work. I'm not really struggling too much. So the only sort of things I'm facing in work are sort of work problems. They're not sort of apprenticeship problems because I understand how the system works a lot more than someone else. But if someone comes from A-levels or some other, it doesn't really matter what they come from, but if they come from somewhere where they haven't the work experience, the people who are providing the apprenticeship, that's the workplace and the training provider, should just take note that they haven't had any work experience before. They're going to be nervous in the workplace. They might not know how to send an Outlook email. They might not know how to make a meeting. They might not be very good at keeping their time. So focusing on soft skills, focusing on soft skill development in the workplace and in training is so crucial for getting those students and apprentices to be the best of themselves. And a lot of training providers and apprenticeship standards will build in a soft skills week where they learn things like project management, presentations, public speaking, a lot like what I'm doing right now, mock interviews like this, mock panels, and they'll teach that. And it might not cover the full basis, but it will give the students some sort of level of experience and knowledge on how to tackle situations like this when they haven't been exposed to it before.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Anya, have you had any T-level training opposed to apprenticeships?
Sorry, you cut out there. Could you repeat that?
experience of having T-level students doing work experience at your?
I think I caught the back end of you, which was saying, do we have any T-levels apprenticeships? Was that your question?
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's the question. Was just wondering if you had any personal experience of it.
So I applied for one, which I think would have been the same year as Lewis did it. It was the first year. I think it was like, I'm thinking back, it would have been 2020. Probably 2020 September, I think. So probably the same year that Lewis did his, and it was the same. It was the first year of that apprenticeship, not apprenticeship standard, that T-level standard in the college that would have been local to me at the time. And the reason I didn't do it was because I didn't want to be a guinea pig almost, but the irony is that I was the only person in my college to do my apprenticeship course, so I still ended up, and the first person to do it at my college, so I still ended up being the guinea pig, so It's fine. But no, we don't. But I definitely think it's something that we should look into. The only I see this question come up, and I know this would be our almost objection to hiring a T-level student, is that, and I know this can be flexible of whether you have them for a block amount of time or you have them for just 1 day a week, but almost because it's not an apprentice where they're there 4 days and it's just 1 day. It's hard to almost give them responsibilities, long-term responsibilities, if they're only in once a week for 1 day. And then what you don't want to do in that situation is palm them with all of the like admin jobs that no one's got round to at the end of the week. And so I'm guessing that's probably your first placement, Lewis, and something like that. Yeah. I think a lot of companies may take advantage of that, and you would hope that the colleges now would be wise to that and vet them out. So again, my only advice would be, I see that, like, just even thinking about it in my head, I would see that being a thing to happen. So I guess my thoughts on that, my not advice because I haven't done it, but my thoughts would be that, yeah, just make sure that you've got something that they can be responsible for. So they are actually experiencing that, having responsibility and accountability for certain tasks, but something that is maybe a focus for the long-term goal of the business. It's not a short-term, immediate, need it now. So it's something that maybe you want to get round to in a couple of, like, a year or so, and maybe looking at doing some research and then planning that, and then things like that, and then learning them skills of project management and planning for that, and while also researching into the tech side. Maybe something like that would be more suitable for a T-level student, rather than just giving them the odd jobs at the end of the week, which is it's not benefiting anyone other than you as a business, which is a bit selfish.
So that was a bit divulged for our purpose, but I think it's very important to look at these, because there's more than just apprenticeships out there. But to get back to apprenticeships, and this is the final question we have before we take anything from the audience, and I think this is to all panelists. So really wanted to talk about, I'll say the question first, then we'll try and all say something about it. So what practical steps can organizations take to ensure that their apprenticeship programs align with equality, diversity and inclusion policies, creating opportunities for a wider range of candidates? And Tony, can you start us off on this, please?
I think that the first thing to note is that apprenticeships are notable in their success at increasing diversity in the workplace. And that's not just the male to female ratio in tech. They are kind of percentage points higher as programs than the rest of the tech population, although that still lags way behind the actual population statistics. So small victories and all that, but you tend to get more kind of female apprentices on program as a general kind of comparison against the population in tech. So they are successful. They are successful. They have again, one of the advantages of apprenticeships from the EDI point of view is that you do have, through the training providers, colleges and universities, you will have that additional pastoral network, which means that you can you can rely on a third party a little bit more for some support. So as an SME, you might not have a networking group as Lewis has got access to, for kind of BAME colleagues or kind of LGBTQ plus colleagues. So, but through training providers, through organizations like BCS, you're bringing in apprentices, you may well be able to tap into those third-party groups and put additional support in place that you might not be able to through other means. So they are a great route to improving your EDI or kind of being inclusive as a recruitment policy. Having said that, it's always going to depend largely on your approach as an organization. Some organizations get this extremely right. A good example is not in the tech sector, but National Rail, for example, have done some great things in getting more female and BAME engineers on program through their apprenticeship programs. And they've done that through systematically taking a very data-driven approach, but also a very careful approach with their job adverts, where they place their job adverts, how they word their job adverts, and what they're doing to kind of go through their outreach programs. So that, starting with that kind of language that they use around recruitment and bringing people into the development programs and working from there. So yeah, good data-driven approach. We talked a little bit before this call, Dan, about that early outreach and engagement. And Anya and Lewis have both talked about the fact that they go into schools and colleges. I can't encourage that anymore, kind of highly enough. It's, there are great organizations. I mentioned I'm an apprenticeship ambassador. That's a DFE network of employers of all sizes. It's a regional network of employers and apprentices. And we're all, as ambassadors, tasked to go into schools and colleges and champion apprenticeships to other organizations, to other potential apprentices. There's no use in me as a 50-year-old bloke going in and talking to a bunch of school kids about the value of apprenticeships. I've never been an apprentice, but putting someone like Lewis or someone like Anya in the classroom and getting to talk about their lived experiences when they're only a few years older than those people who are currently going through their GCSEs or their A-levels, that matters. So early engagement at primary school and secondary school, that's going to pay off in the long run. Anya's example was brilliant. I had a pen in my bag. How much swag do we give away as organizations that we just think goes nowhere, and somewhere there's a pencil somewhere with your business name on it and somebody's going to be willing enough to be able to make the call or send an email through? It's a great initiative, but it does matter. It does count. So that EDI is about being in front of people. If they can't see it, they can't be it. Show those examples, learn from those organizations that have been through this process, and be data driven, be brutal about what works and what doesn't work, and kind of develop the things that are working for you to put the right support in place. Again, going back to my kind of first comment, reach out to the training providers, reach out to the endpoint assessment organizations and membership bodies like BCS, and find where the support is, because you can't do this alone. We're better when we do it collectively.
Excellent. I mean, so Anya, if you come in there, I mean, so what, as a person that recruits apprenticeships, what's your approach?
Yeah, so a couple of different things that probably also do what Tony does. If you can't see it, then you can't be it, and that it rings so true, especially when I find when I go back to my old school and I stand in front of the students there, and it's you're talking to them about why digital apprenticeships are important, and you get the people thinking, oh gosh, especially when you get the graveyard shift at 3:15 p.m. and that they're you've got 15 minutes and the attention span is not great. And I remember I was given this presentation on why apprenticeships are important and why you should consider them in your post-16 journey. And I got really fed up of looking at the audience and people looking a bit and I turned around and pointed to this one this one student who was sat in my seat that used to be my allocated seat when I sat there. He wasn't really paying much attention. I went, that seat there is where I used to sit, and I used to be, and they didn't realize that I was from that school until I said that. And suddenly you saw people's ears prick up, and they're like, oh, okay, so it's not just some random person who's coming in from a better area or whatever it is, who's telling us this is what you should do, and she knows best because she hasn't lived, she doesn't come from where I come from, and she doesn't experience what I experience, and this and that. And when I could kind of relate to the fact that I've been there, and obviously that's a case of like, that was my own school, so it was a bit of an odd one, but even still though, the message is still clear that, you know, if you're relatable, you've got the same accent as someone, I haven't got a posh Southern accent as much as I would love to. I sound like I'm from Yorkshire, and it resonates with those that are from Yorkshire also. My also thoughts on making sure, you know, that your job adverts, if you choose to go down that route of actually posting a job advert for an apprenticeship, is just making sure it's inclusive. I know a lot of studies, separate ones, but one that I saw, I think it was a couple of years ago, LinkedIn did a gender insights study, and it was basically highlighted that men are more than likely to apply for a job if they see that they can tick about 60% of the qualifications and skills listed, where women, and I will like put my hands up and say this is very much me as well, will only apply if there's 100%, if they can do every single one of them things, which usually means you're overqualified. If you can do every single thing that the job advert is asking you for, then you're overqualified for that role, probably. And so just making sure that maybe you have an emphasis on maybe them softer skills, or maybe if every qualification isn't required, or especially when it comes to apprentices, you shouldn't be really asking for any experience, and that's another key thing. A lot of entry-level roles, and maybe this is a bit further on from apprenticeships, but a lot of entry-level roles want 4 years, 5 years experience. I don't think that's entry level. So just be mindful of the job adverts. And then also when it comes to them job adverts, where you're looking for them, where you're posting them, and the people who you're wanting to target. Let's say if you keep getting the same group of people applying for your role, making sure that those people are where you're applying. No, that's not what I want to say. The thing that I wanted to say was that if you're getting the same type of people and you want to broaden that, you need to be posting that job advert somewhere else. So and when we did the dry run for this, I shared this with you guys, that one of the people that I follow on LinkedIn is she goes by the name STEM Babe, and she's a bit of a influencer for women in tech. And I've been fortunate enough to do a couple of panel sessions with her, and she's a really, really lovely woman. And she did a post the other day where she basically screenshots some of the job adverts on government websites for degree apprenticeships and stuff in tech. And then she reposts them with a kind of voiceover content on platforms such as TikTok and Instagram Reels. Now, she did her LinkedIn post, and she posted her demographic insights off of the back of that TikTok. And interestingly, I think 60% or something along those lines, again, I'd have to go back, but it was along 60% were women. So it's actually the majority of that people were hitting that. And again, they were from different regions in the UK as well, so not just specifically London, and then also they were from different backgrounds and ethnicities as well. So it just goes to show though, and I'm sure a lot of employers would be like, well, are we really going to target our job adverts on TikTok? Well, probably not, but also it's just worth keeping in mind. If you keep getting the same people, then you need to start looking elsewhere.
Okay, thanks, Anya. I mean, we've only got a couple of minutes left, Lewis, but I mean, I think in terms of having just sort of successfully applied for an apprenticeship, what when you're looking for one, what attracted you to an organization in order to apply?
Lots of different things. As I mentioned earlier, I looked a lot at companies that I knew. So companies that I'd seen at careers fairs, that I'd spoken to, maybe friends or family, but also big names. You know, I'd applied to places like Airbus, Rolls-Royce, McLaren, and Kinetic and BAE Systems. Places that I was interested in, places that I was quite passionate in. I was quite interested in defence, so I wanted to find something in the defence industry or something in the motorsport industry. And I ended up in the defence industry. I'm very, very happy with. But also looking at a company's experience and how they deal with their employees. So not deal with, but how they take care of them. You know, are they allowing them to maybe work from home and do hybrid working? Are they allowing them to maybe take a half day on Friday? Are they allowing them to go and pursue, you know, certain projects on their own if they want to? You know, are they super strict? How do they work? Do they, you know, is it all just like sort of other people? Is it, you know, is it lots of different people? Is it, you know, are you working with majority one area of sort of technology, or are you working with lots of different areas of technology? So there's lots of things for me. You know, I'd be lying if I said pay wasn't one of them. Out of the 2 offers I received, I did choose the one that was paying higher. And I'd be lying if I said that wasn't the main reason. But also the benefits as well, you know, having a company that has a really good pension, maybe they have a share scheme if you can buy into their shares, if they have maybe like a company car cycle to work scheme, maybe they have certain clubs and societies. I was really, really interested in the apprentice societies and something we call the employee resource groups. Across BAE Systems, we have groups for different people, for just different groups of people. We have, you know, groups for people in the LGBTQ community that I'm part of, or there's groups for people that are veterans, or there's groups of people that have with hidden disabilities, or people with, you know, certain protected characteristics that we want to promote as part of our workforce. And they're enjoyed by everyone. Everyone in BA really, really likes them. Everyone can sort of relate to one of them, and it's really nice to sort of find your family. And other companies do that, but I really, really like BAE Systems one. So that was one of the main reasons I did as well. But mostly, you know, if you're talking to an 18-year-old, 16-year-old, they will want to go with a company for some reasons. Maybe that's really local, maybe they do something that you're really, really interested in, but they will, a lot of people my age, especially when I was looking, they were looking at the pay. You know, apprentices famously don't get paid that much, but it's more than just the base salary. It's, you know, what other benefits can you give them, what other, you know, support can you give them that enriches and sort of enhances that as well. But ultimately it is that as well. You know, it is an important topic to talk on, and it is one that needs to be discussed more.
Okay, thank you very much. So we come to the end of this panel now. We're going to, if you have any questions, please, I'll give you a few seconds to put it into the chat. But I don't know if any of you three have any sort of final things we feel we haven't discussed that you want to get across. Tony, did you have anything else while people are putting the questions in the chat? No, Anya?
No, just that I think it's really important to keep talking about them and keep attending things like this, and also providing, if you're unsure, ask. It's you know, we've all got LinkedIn at our fingertips now. You can look at previous apprentices and reach out. Chances are there's probably people in your network who are apprentices, and if you're unsure of hiring one, maybe think about messaging one. I got a LinkedIn message the other day, and they'd seen on my profile that I'd done the apprenticeship standard that they were hiring for, and they, we ended up having a full-on catch up over the phone on it, and they actually probably got a lot out of reaching out to me and asking for my experience. And I was like, read the knowledge, skills and behaviors before you hire them. Make sure you can hit them all, and if not, then find an opportunity somewhere in the business where they can. So yeah, just reach out to people, ask. It's my advice.
Excellent. Tony, did you have any final comments before we close?
Oh, see, Anya's just stolen my thunder there. I genuinely have a T-shirt with "Read the Assessment Plan" printed on it, which I was going to wear tonight, but I couldn't lay my hands on it. But yeah, absolutely, it's getting it right means getting it right way before you even take your first apprentice on, if that's the position you're in. And if you have taken apprentices on before, it's always good to review that onboarding process and that initial process. It starts with matching the job to the apprenticeship standard and working with the training provider that you've decided on to align the two and make sure that the apprentice has the best possible opportunity of passing their apprenticeship and getting the best grade that they can achieve on that. Yeah, there are resources out there. BCS offers a whole bundle of free resources for apprentices who are on program and for line managers, and again, certainly the line manager toolkit is out there for people. So yeah, it's always best to ask the training provider, the college, the assessment organization you're working with. I'll drop my LinkedIn profile in the chat. I'm more than happy to connect with anybody who's interested in tech apprenticeships. I can talk a glass eye to sleep about them, so I'm quite comfortable. If anyone wants to connect with me, please do so.
Excellent, thank you, Annie. And Lewis, any final comments?
I have no final comments. I just hope everybody got something useful out of this, and I hope to see more people in apprenticeships soon.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, all three of you, for joining the West Yorkshire BCS for this event. It's been very enlightening. The video will be available. It takes a while just to get that organised and sorted out. Tony's LinkedIn's in the chat for everybody there, and eventually it'll be on our website. So if there was anything you want to come back to, you can watch that video. Thank you very much for all of you who joined us, and I'm going to bring this meeting to a close.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Dan.
Ben.